Ah, Christmas. A time of warmth, joy, and fading internet trends. About this time of year, magical things tend to happen. And my friends, something magical has happened on this day. Not in the little town of Bethlehem. Not in the back of a magical sleigh flying over the ocean. No, right here, smack dab in a dimly lit basement somewhere in Canada. The magic of Christmas somehow reached out and brought back an internet legend. A legend to approximately 700 people.
That's right, I'm back. Deal with it.
It's Obscurity!
Anybody who's watched my Christmas traditions video knows just how much I love Christmas. And if you haven't watched that video, go give it a watch right now. It's seriously one of my best videos, and it deserves a whole lot more attention. Okay, shameless plug over. But seriously, what's not to love? The decorations, the presents, the sweets, awkward family time with people you only see this time of year. Yeah, there's certainly a lot to love about Christmas. But personally, and this should come as no surprise to any of you, my favorite thing about Christmas was always the Christmassy media. Whether it be watching the best of Christmas classics on YTV, or tearing off another door of an advent calendar with the Secret World of Santa Claus on Teletoon, us Canadian kids had it pretty darn good around Christmas time in the 2000s. Every station seemingly took on a new life during the holidays, complete with new holiday-themed station IDs and airings of Christmas specials, filling everyone with Christmas spirit and anticipation for Santa's arrival. Sure, I guess it's still somewhat like that these days. Some stations are definitely more Christmassy than others, but all in all, the world of TV is nowhere near as festive as things were in those days. But I know what you want to hear. You want to hear about Christmas time on Treehouse TV. I know my audience well. And of course, like any other time of year, Treehouse certainly took the spotlight in my household around the holidays. They really went all out. Not only were there all the usual dressings like holiday episodes of favorite shows and airings of old Rankin Bass classics, but they also completely redid their CG bumpers to fit in with the holiday theme. Not sure how many others will remember this, but there were also special Treetown shorts made for this time. The only one I can 100% confirm is this Treetown rendition of We Wish You a Merry Christmas playing in the background of one of my old home movies. Now, I'm sure many more were made, but along with the full short version of We Wish You a Merry Christmas, they've all been lost in the seemingly endless abyss of missing Treehouse content. But, and I hate to break it to you, I really do, not everything was quite as merry and bright in Treetown as it seemed during the holiday seasons of the 2000s. What if I told you that they had a yearly tradition for a while that had scenes of violence, frightening imagery, and even what could be considered attempted rape? If you grew up around the same time I did, I'm sure you're familiar with a show by the name of Toy Castle. It's a show that you either loved or violently hated.
I'm the soldier! I'm the sailor! Ballerina!
I mostly fell into the first camp, though some of its more questionable elements kept it from being anywhere close to one of my favorite trio shows. Looking back at it now, though, it's clear that a lot of love and effort went into crafting the show. The series was created by Catherine Jeans and Neil Bregman of Sound Venture Productions. It spawned from a desire to find a show that was both educational and entertaining to spark the creativity of their young daughter Ivy. Finding none satisfactory, they dug up some concepts from their older projects and created the Toy Castle, a show that combines the grand nature of ballet and the imaginative storytelling of children's TV through dance, music, and mime. Toy Castle followed a ragtag group of children's toys based mostly on fairy tale-like characters who come to life when their owners go to sleep. Each episode consisted of 3 segments which each aimed to teach life lessons through narration and performance. Each story was lovingly crafted and ran by little Ivy before bedtime. If Ivy attempted to act out the story or commented on how much she enjoyed it, it would go on to the next stage of development. If not, it was tossed or reworked. This strive for quality really shines through when watching the program. Every episode I watched in preparation for this video oozed charm and reminded me of why I loved watching the show so much to wind down as a child. I'm not the only one who thought so either, as the show won a Gemini Award in 2003 for Best Preschool Series, and although the show ended shortly after, it enjoyed many years of reruns on Treehouse, and even managed a brief stay on PBS Kids over in the US. Additionally, a brief sister series aired between shows on Treehouse titled Time to Dance. As the name implies, each episode featured one or more characters performing a short dance routine to an accompanying narration. Though much less complicated, this series still has all the charm of the original, and I remember it airing occasionally between shows long after the original was removed from broadcast. But of course, we can't talk about this show without addressing the horrifying frog-shaped elephant in the room, the costume design. Yeah, it's no secret that for every child that adored Toy Castle, there was another child who loathed Toy Castle. Some of these designs look like they just got off a train from the Uncanny Valley and brought a few of their friends with them. The nature of the costumes vary wildly from character to character, as each end up being either the stuff of nightmares or suspiciously attractive. I'm looking at you, Mama Mouse. And it's not just the appearance I'm talking about, but seemingly the quality of the material they were made with as well. It's clear that they took a very theatrical approach. One where each costume is heavily exaggerated, as one might be on stage to stand out from a distance. This works well, as it fits in with the whole ballet aspect. However, this also inherits problems that sometimes come with theater shows. You get some costumes that look fantastic, others that are horrifying, and some that quite frankly could have used more work. Take the soldier, for example. One could argue that he, along with Ballerina, are the main characters of the show. He's certainly one of the more iconic ones that come to mind whenever I think of it. And although his general look is iconic, I find the quality of material used has a fakeness to it that ends up looking more homemade than anything else. I mean, come on. Was it impossible to give this man a pair of pants that fit properly? Can't say I'm a fan of this guy's junk staring me in the face every time I want to sit down and enjoy a Treehouse clack. Compare this material to that used for the clown and the goblin costumes, who I'm sure both contribute to their fair share of nightmares, and the difference is, well, uncanny. The unfortunate truth is that even the better made costumes have their share of problems. Namely, that they're terrifying. Clowrophobia, the fear of clowns, is a phobia that affects an ungodly amount of people, especially since the Great Clown Apocalypse of 16. You show the wrong person an image of our beloved Lunette the Clown, and you'll have them shaking in their boots. Now try showing them this. But what if I told you that there was something far more concerning than the clown? That he isn't quite the guy we should be worried about. Somebody else lurking around the Toy Castle has far worse intentions. But who? To answer this, we gotta go back. Back before the Toy Castle. Hell, back before Treehouse TV itself. Back before I was born. Back to the year of 1992. You see, you might not know this, but the Toy Castle is actually a spin-off. A spin-off of something much more concerning. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the classic tale of Hans Christian Andersen's The Steadfast Tin Soldier. A classic tale now closely associated with Christmas that features a one-legged tin soldier who falls deeply in love with a paper ballerina and faces off with an evil jack-in-the-box. Well, it just so happens that Sound Venture Productions produced a TV ballet based around this story in 1992 that, in many ways, would prove to be the basis of the beloved Toy Castle some 8 years later. The problem? It was horrifying. Yet, it somehow became a Christmas-time tradition on Treehouse TV for many years. Very little information about it is available on the internet, aside from a brief mention on pages about Toy Castle. The fact of the matter is, though, this lack of information used to be much worse. Nowadays, you can find the special through a quick Google search. This was not the case back in 2017, however, when I initially conceptualized this video. When trying to think about videos I could make for Christmas that year, I thought back on childhood Christmases of the past that could constitute a good video.
You can sure not ask for enough toys.
My mind eventually wandered to The Tin Soldier, a TV special I remembered Treehouse airing annually around Christmas time in the 2000s. I remembered very little about it at the time, just that it seemed to be related to Toy Castle, a show that I knew I loved. However, I also remembered that The Tin Soldier was never something I looked forward to seeing on the program guide. Even though I didn't quite remember why, I knew it had the perfect makings of a video when I ended up having to scam myself in order to get a copy. Yeah, you heard that right. After spending an ungodly amount of time scouring the internet and only finding sketchy images of old VHS tapes, I was eventually led to this Amazon listing of The Tin Soldier, a very loose 1995 adaptation of the original tale starring Jon Voight. Clearly, not all was as it seemed with this listing, as the reviews mentioned receiving the wrong product. January 31st, 2014. 1 star, not as depicted. The movie on the cover as described is not the movie you get. None of the actors pictured/described on the cover are in the movie. It was instead a ballet. I was extremely disappointed and angry. I expected to get the DVD described. It was not because the wrong DVD was in the wrong box. It was the right DVD and the right box, but the wrong movie. I still cannot figure that out. Worse, I bought it twice from 2 different sellers with the same result. So for this film, buyer be very aware. I'm sorry to say this, JT, but your pain made me very happy and filled me with hope. A ballet? Could this be the disturbing special I remembered from my childhood? With a price of about $6, well, I couldn't go wrong, and quickly ordered it. When it arrived, I was pleased to find that the listing was correct. Though the case and even the DVD itself had the print of the John Voight Tin Soldier, what was on the disc was far more intriguing, and, frankly, disturbing. By the time the DVD arrived, I had already decided on my Christmas traditions video for that year. But I quickly ripped the DVD, watched it, and put it away on a hard drive, knowing it had the perfect makings of a video whenever the time was right. Well folks, now is that time. It's that time of year, and once again some nostalgic force has pulled me back. It's time to venture back into the realm of obscurity and explore the makings of yet another Treehouse classic, and discover just why I think this special should have stayed far, far away from the Tree Townies' home turf. Without any further ado, this, my friends, is Soundventure's Tin Soldier. We open with the title card and opening credits against what appear to be pastel paintings, a tease of some of the future horrors that we have in store for us. After a brief glimpse into our future nightmares, we're introduced to our narrator, as she introduces us to a small army of tin soldiers.
Once upon a time, there was a small army of tin soldiers.
I can't help but notice that these little guys seem to be packing something big. Maybe Soldier's bulge in Toy Castle wasn't so accidental after all. That aside, let's take a second to talk about our narrator. Apparently, the narration is done by Sally Struthers. This isn't someone who I'm quite familiar with, but apparently she's a pretty big deal, with roles in such classics as All in the Family and Gilmore Girls. I'm sure some of your moms and grandmas know her pretty well, but can't say I've seen much of her work. What's interesting though, is that there seems to be 2 different narrations floating around for this film. I say this because the version I have on DVD is completely different than the one I've seen on YouTube.
The boy was entranced by his new tin friend.
The boy was entranced by his new tin friend.
I'm going to assume the DVD's narrator is that of Struthers, mostly because the YouTube version's audio is incredibly tinny. But also because Sally's credit is nowhere to be seen in those versions. If this is Sally, then she does a fine job. She has quite the calming voice that brings levity to the more intense scenes, while the YouTube version's narrator on the other hand sounds as though she's been paid $5 and literally phoned it in. Anywho, the narrator, whoever she may be, tells us of how this small army of tin soldiers have been specially selected as a gift for a young boy on his birthday. We're then introduced to the young boy himself, his sister, and their nanny. The nanny blindfolds the boy and leads him to his presents. The boy is quite pleased with his presents, with the exception of one, a Harley Quinn Jack-in-the-Box, who Toy Castle viewers will note looks a lot like the Goblin. Thankfully though, the boy is distracted from this eldritch horror by his brand new set of tin soldiers. As the boy imagines the soldiers dancing, he takes note that one soldier had been made with a false leg, as there had not been enough tin in the cast to finish him. This imperfect soldier immediately becomes the boy's favorite. Unlike some other characters, which we'll get to shortly, don't you worry, the Tin Soldier's costume remained largely unchanged when he was brought over to Toy Castle, aside from his false leg of course. The boy runs to his father and exclaims that the toy is alive, because he swears he can hear its little heart beating. Cute. If that were me, the toy would have already been halfway out the window. Unfazed, the boy becomes entranced with the toy, and begins to imagine that he himself was a soldier attending a full-dress military ball. This is where things get a little bit weird. The boy, still imagining himself as the soldier, sees his sister acting as her toy ballerina, and thinks she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Now I know, they're playing, and I was an only child, so I don't exactly know how siblings play. But I highly doubt this is normal. Anyway, the boy and his sister dance the night away, and as the Tin Soldier and the ballerina are about to consummate their love, the sketchy Jack-in-the-Box pops out of said box all on his lonesome. I don't know if I've ever stated it on this channel, and if I have, I certainly didn't emphasize it enough, but I have a huge irrational fear of toys, specifically dolls or stuffed animals, coming to life on their own. Now, I can't say I'm quaking in my boots every time I watch Toy Story, but in this sort of context where the object coming to life obviously has bad intentions, well, let's just say I find it a little unnerving. It likely stems from being forced by one of my friends to watch the Haunted Doll episode of The Twilight Zone as a kid, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. You guys can look that shit up for yourselves. What? I'm not putting myself through that trauma again. Anyways, the boys' family brushes off a lot quicker than I would and send the kids to bed, bringing along all their new toys with them, including the Jack-in-the-Box, while their parents prepare to enjoy a little alone time. As the nanny puts the kids to sleep, we're introduced to the toy castle itself, which, might I add, looks like it's seen better days. Nonetheless, it still boasts many familiar characters that I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with. The nanny takes the ballerina from the sleeping girl and the soldier from the boy and places them in front of the castle with the other toys. She attempts to force the Jack-in-the-Box closed, but struggles to do so. We then get this shot. Yeah, I think it's starting to get pretty clear why I think this is nightmare fuel now, but trust me when I say that this is just the beginning. As soon as the nanny leaves, the Jack-in-the-Box springs out all by himself and looks around the room. Though asleep, the boy seemingly senses this and begins to have a nightmare that I'm sure was contagious to all the children watching at home. In his sleep, the boy dubs the Jack-in-the-Box an evil goblin who did not wish any of the other toys well. It's here that we get our first good look at the specials designed for the goblin, and oh my god did they not hold anything back. This version of Goblin is what you'd likely see in the corner of your room if you dropped acid after watching an episode of Toy Castle. For the most part, the two goblins' costumes are pretty similar, with the large exception of the face.
Your face! God damn it!
Something about this guy's face is literally the stuff of nightmares. I think it's the nose, or maybe it's just a resemblance to such a likable and familiar character. Either way, this man is fucked, and I'm positive he's scarred many a child in his day. Thankfully, things take a much lighter turn as we plummet into what could only be described as a pilot for Toy Castle. Just like in that series, the toys spring to life and dance the night away. It's now that we're properly introduced to the creepypastified toys of the castle. First Ragdoll, who Soldier seems to get a little too comfortable with. Now, some people, obviously not me, would go so far as to say that they thought Ragdoll was a total babe on the Toy Castle. But here, she kinda looks like she was auditioning for the next Megan movie. The real problem lies within her face. Not the actress's, I'm sure she was beautiful, but her makeup does her no favors and ends up injecting pure nightmare fuel into everyone's veins. The same could be said for the rest of the Toy Castle crew who are introduced shortly after, namely, Clown. The Sailor and the Strongman are mostly fine, as is China Doll, who we're introduced to a little later, but the Clown is something else. Growing up, I never actually saw the Clown from the main series as much of a threat, despite my aversion to clowns and his frankly freaky costume. This version of the Clown, however, could easily give Pennywise a run for his money. His problem is the same as with Ragdoll and the Goblin. His face.
God damn it!
I honestly think it really comes down to the fact that it's familiar, yet not at the same time. Next, we're introduced to the Duke and Duchess of Frog, known as Frederick and Frida on the Toy Castle. The less said about them, the better. I've never been a fan of frogs, nor frog costumes, and I can't say these guys are changing my mind. Finally, the ballerina joins the dance floor, and the soldier is blindsided by her beauty. The poor guy's initially hesitant to approach her, but one good look at the clown, and he quickly realizes that there are far worse things on this planet than nerves, and he decides to make his move. The ballerina is no match for the Rizmiser's moves, and quickly falls for him. They dance and tease with each other for the rest of the night until the hideous goblin shows up and totally cockblocks their favorite soldier. Seriously, what the fuck is that? My man's looking like the devil in Tenacious D. Evidently, the goblin is jealous of the ballerina's love for the soldier, and instead of crying in the corner like the rest of us, he decides to fight for her. Unfortunately for him, Ballerina has no interest in slasher villains and sticks with the soldier. Eventually, the other toys have enough of Goblin's harassment and they all demand that he leave. Goblin does so, but threatens that he'll be back later. The soldier remains steadfast and ends up dancing with the ballerina and the other toys for the rest of the night, which is pretty darn commendable because if I had this guy after me, I'd be out of there lickety-split. The toys retire for the day as dawn approaches, all except for the soldier, who vows to spend all day protecting the ballerina. Toy life secrecy be damned, I guess. Eventually, the goblin strikes back, and the two have an epic battle of epic proportions. The soldier fights valiantly, but is no match for the utter lunacy of the goblin, who ends up tossing him right out the nursery window. I remember this part particularly bothering me as a child. At that point in life, I was used to seeing these characters laughing and playing together, so seeing the goblin toss one of my favorite characters out of a 3-story window and into a sewer was something that kinda bothered me. And being treated these kind of visuals certainly didn't help. Look, the year was 1992, so I guess I can't be too harsh on them. But my god, the few times we get these CG segments are really distracting. And thank god they only deal with the soldier, because I'd hate to see an early CGI interpretation of really any other character. Early CGI is the least of our worries though, as we now have to face one of the most unnerving shots of the whole special. Hell, I'm willing to say one of the most unnerving shots ever aired on Treehouse TV. And yes, I'm saying that with full knowledge that they've accidentally aired horror material in the past. Yeah, the shot itself is unnerving and would fit right in with anything in Blumhouse's catalog, but I think the thing that makes this really unnerving is the fact that Treehouse willingly aired this. This wasn't a mistake. Some guy watched this and the rest of the film and thought to himself that it would fit in great with the rest of Treehouse's holiday catalog. And then some other guy decided it would be a great thing to air annually on the network.
What the fuck?
Trust me when I say this is only the beginning. Yeah, it gets worse. The soldier and his rifle slide down into the sewer and are quickly greeted by its residents. Giant, hideous, red-eyed water rats. Eventually, these rats begin chasing and violently attacking the soldier. They claim the man is missing his papers and must be punished violently. No, I'm not kidding. The soldier tries to escape, but quickly realizes there's no way out. The poor man tries to defend himself, but is quickly overwhelmed. The rats quickly grab him and beat the ever-loving shit out of him. After taking a quick break to dance, the rats gang up on him completely and beat him within an inch of his life. On Treehouse TV, by the way.
You're watching Treehouse.
Seemingly close to death, the tin soldier has a vision of his ballerina being threatened by the goblin. This gives him the strength to go Super Saiyan and defeat the rats through the sheer power of God and anime. How exactly does he do this? By dancing and threatening to shoot them. On Treehouse TV, after scaring off the rat bastards, the tin soldier hops in a broken old teacup and sails out of the sewer through the power of shitty CGI. Unfortunately for Mr. Tinny here, the budget could only afford 30 seconds of CG, and his broken cup begins to sink. Despite how light he probably is, the soldier starts sinking to the bottom of the ocean, where he's quickly eaten by the world's ugliest fish. The end. Just kidding. We still haven't gotten to the really messed up stuff yet. Sometime later, the kid's nanny returns from market with a huge fish for dinner. You see where this is going? She dances around and looks a little too longingly at said fish. She ends up almost stabbing the boy as he and his sister rush into the room and in front of her knife. And right when we think we've seen the edge of his stupidity, he picks up said knife which the nanny unwisely put down and begins to play with it. Great lesson to be teaching the kids there, Treehouse. And yes, I know he's a little kid, but even I had better sense than to be jumping in front of knives as a kid. And I'm a dumbass. The nanny takes the knife back and scowls at him, which clearly he's unbothered by, as he goes on to sword fight his sister with the other kitchen utensils. You know, giving this little shit a tin soldier for his birthday probably wasn't the smartest choice his parents ever made. As the boy settles for fist fighting his sister, the nanny finally has a chance to cut open the fish, and lo and behold, guess what she finds in there? You're never gonna guess. The one-legged tin soldier, who has somehow avoided becoming literal fish food for the past few weeks. The boy and soldier are reunited as the boy imagines jumping into his arms. And yes, even though I think the boy's a little shit, this is still kind of a sweet moment. The boy rushes off to the kids' room to play with them and hears war stories. Now, personally, I like to imagine the soldier being dead after being in the fish's gut all this time, and all the other toys are forced to play around and ignore their friend's dead body. It's a really good thing he's not, though, as the goblin's been causing issues around the castle and sliding into Ballerina's DMs. In all seriousness though, this is actually by far the most disturbing point of the special. In my opinion, it beats out any of the disturbing imagery and eerie nature we've talked about thus far. Why? Because the goblin's behavior here is nothing short of rapey, with the narrator even going so far as to state that the ballerina's been fending off numerous unwelcome advances from him. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that this flew way over the audience's head back in the day. It certainly did mine. But looking at this from an adult perspective, this scene is disturbing in some of the worst ways possible. We see the goblin kiss her, throw her on the ground, and even go so far as to pounce on her. I have no idea how this flew past the censors back in the day, but it's something you'd cringe at seeing in a Netflix series, not flipping Treehouse TV. Now, did Soundventure Productions intend for this to have come off this way? I certainly hope not, and honestly don't think so. This is probably due more to the exaggerated nature of the ballet, but the fact that it could be interpreted as this at all means it has no place in children's TV and should have never made it into the final product. I'm all for mature themes in kids' TV, but this is just a step beyond. PSA aside, this ugly bastard's about to have his way with the ballerina. On Treehouse TV.
Treehouse, motherfucker!
But thankfully stops as he hears the kids approaching the room. The kids are surprised to see the ballerina lying on the floor, but they quickly move on and reunite the toys. Before long, the children are called to dinner, and all the toys reunite properly. The toys are elated to have the soldier back with them, but make fun of him for smelling like fish. They throw a bucket of glitter over him and call it a day. The ballerina returns, and the two lovers are finally reunited. Thankfully for the soldier, she seems to pay no mind to the foul smell coming from his trousers. To absolutely no one's surprise nor delight, the goblin returns and is none too happy about the soldier's sudden appearance. He's revealed to be an ableist and makes fun of the soldier's false leg. He then quickly abducts the ballerina, heads into the castle, before quickly changing his mind and returning with her to dance around as the rest of the toys panic. The soldier then remembers his training in jujitsu, channels the power of love once more, and finally defeats the goblin. How? By pinching his nose and throwing him off the side of the castle, much to the delight of the toys and children everywhere. The soldier and the ballerina are finally left to their own devices and share a kiss. Sometime later, the kids return to find their jack-in-the-box shattered on the floor. This is actually another scene I was kind of disturbed by as a child because it quickly registered to me that they just stumbled upon a dead body. The children are at a loss to explain how the toy had been broken, but are quickly distracted by the sight of the soldier and ballerina's embrace. It'd be at that point I'd have set the whole castle on fire, but instead the girl rushes off to tell her parents as the boy stares at them in shock, which honestly is by far the more reasonable reaction. They somehow decide that this means the two got married, and decree them the new king and queen of the tiny merry land. And of course, they all live happily ever after, finally ending the shared fever dream once and for all. Surprisingly, Soundventure actually went with the good ending for the story, as the original and most interpretations end with the boy throwing the soldier into the fire, and the paper ballerina quickly joining him after an unfortunate gust of wind. I say surprisingly because the rest of the special actually follows the original story pretty closely. Everything from the hideous jack-in-the-box to the soldier's adventures in the sewer actually have roots in the original story. I would say it's a welcome change though. With all the shit these characters go through in the story, they deserve a happy ending. Plus, a grisly end for the two main characters definitely wouldn't have done any favors for a special already so disturbing. So now that I've had the, pleasure of revisiting this Treehouse Christmas classic, what did I think of it? Well, let's just say it's not going to find a place amongst my traditions anytime soon. It's obvious from a watch-through that Soundventure genuinely wanted to make a beautiful ballet version of a classic tale the whole family can enjoy. The problem is, though, that they didn't ever stop to think about what needed to go into that. What could they get away with in terms of visuals? How far could they push the costumes until they reached the edge of the uncanny valley? These are important considerations that must be made when adapting a tale as dark as The Tin Soldier for children. Thankfully, Soundventure seemed to have more than learned their lesson when they created Toy Castle years later. Though it still had its fair share of problems, it was a massive improvement over its inspiration. I'm sure there are a ton of people who grew up with and adore the steadfast Tin Soldier as a classic Christmas tale, but I can't say I'm one of those people. In a toss-up between Mr. Tinny here and the Nutcracker, I'm taking the Nutcracker any day. The fact is that aside from some modern interpretations setting the story at Christmas, the story of the Tin Soldier just isn't that Christmassy. I've seen people online argue that The Tin Soldier makes a good Christmas story because of its themes of bravery and love. But, personally, I prefer my Christmas tales to be merry and bright, not scary and blight. Nonetheless, it went on to inspire one of the most charming Canadian kid shows of my generation, so I suppose it must have done something right. Well, after another few years of hiatus, I've returned yet again to bestow my knowledge of useless crap upon you all. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for sticking with me all this time. No doubt it's been a while, but I never forgot you guys and have been waiting for just the right moment to strike back. If you're new here, why not subscribe for more of the most obscure content on the internet? I've got boatloads of content planned for 2025 and beyond, and can't wait to meet any of you who decide to tag along for a look back at the past and occasionally beyond to the future. Until then, I wish you all a Merry Christmas, or Happy Holidays if you celebrate another holiday during the season. I very much look forward to seeing you all in the new year.
Bye for later.
Bye for later.